I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by David Isaac, co-founder of both Abaqus and Quantum News, two startups with a shared focus on applications for quantum computing and finance. David has decades of experience in tech industry executive management, venture analysis, sales, and marketing roles, and has a BA in business administration from the University of New Brunswick. Today, we'll be discussing future applications for quantum computing and finance and how his organization is working to make them a reality. So, David, welcome. Let me start with just a little bit of background on this for our audience. Can you give me kind of the elevator pitch or the high-level view on what quantum computing is and what makes this better, in a sense, than a traditional computer?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, Tim, thanks very much for having me on your show. I watch it and it's very informative. I'll just do the quick 30-second elevator pitch. Basically, a quantum computer is a computer that is doing a different type of computation than that of a classical computer, and essentially is relying on the deepest laws of physics that we currently understand, which is quantum mechanics. There's like two sort of different competing theories in physics. There's a general relativity for the very large and quantum mechanics for those things, those particles, which are very small. So the world of the very small is quite different and non-intuitive for every human being. Small particles and in like quantum states exhibit behaviors which are just completely strange and abnormal. So quantum computing takes care of that, or takes advantage of those characteristics.
Yeah. Well, and again, we're starting out with the basics, like we mentioned before the interview. We're starting out with some really basic stuff. I'm sure in the audience, some folks are going to watch this and go, "Oh, I already knew that stuff. I read this in Popular Science." And then other people are going to be like, "I had no idea that this was even out there." So, um,
Sure.
but one of the big differences, as I understand things, is that a normal computer stores data in bits, right, which are either on or off. But in a quantum computer, you've got qubits, and so these are basically in this a state of quantum superposition that's kind of both like being off and on at the same time until you actually perform the calculation, right?
That's perfectly stated. Uh, as I'm sure everyone knows, a classical computer stores information and processes information in terms of switches, essentially, that are on or off. So that basically zeros and ones, off and on. A quantum computer is really different in that it takes advantage of the characteristic of superposition or quantum superposition to store information in this quantum superposition. So the qubit, which is the analog to the bit, essentially stores the information in this qubit, which is in a superposition of 1 and 0, on and off. And this is really fundamentally different than how a classical computer would store information and process it. In addition to this, there are other characteristics in quantum mechanics that a quantum computer takes advantage of. So first off, we just talked about, which is quantum superposition. The other thing is something called entanglement. So entanglement is a really important thing in quantum computing because it allows for essentially scaling at a level like an exponential scaling of computational power. Whereas a classical computer, if you add, say, a transistor, you get one more transistor. If you add a bit, you get one more bit. If you add a qubit to a bunch of bits, you are getting essentially a doubling of every previous bit, so qubit. So like the rule is really it's 2 to the n. So if you have 2 qubits, they can assume the state 4 different states. So 2 squared and 2 cubed, 2 to the 4th, 2 to the 5th. But so at low numbers, because it's exponential, this isn't really that impressive. But when you start getting up to numbers that are like, say, 50 qubit machines, 53 qubit machines, which is what Google had. I think IBM has like a 127 now. You're getting potentially 50 or 2 to the 53rd power states that information can be processed and stored in. So this is one of the main reasons that people are really excited about this right now, because there wouldn't be enough computational power in the universe to, if you had a classical machine to solve a problem at, say, 1,000 qubit or a 2,000 qubit computer to solve. That statement's a little bit exaggerated, I think. But the point is, like, exponential growth is really quite a fascinating phenomenon mathematically. So this is why people are really interested in this. There's just not enough like stuff in the universe to perform these sorts of computations. The other thing is the other thing that quantum computers take advantage of is called interference. So they're in a particle in a wave state can have like a negative amplitude and a positive amplitude. So you kind of use these two, use the positives and the negatives to cancel out wrong answers, and you synchronize the qubits to point you toward the right answer. That's vast simplification, but that's just one of the reasons that like people are working really hard on this right now, and a lot of research is going into it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And I've been doing I followed this for quite a while, but I've been doing some reading for the interview as well. I just saw a quote online. Someone had said, they said that today's quantum computers, it's kind of like a bicycle compared to, regular computers, which are like a jet aircraft. But they'd said, keep in mind that the Wright brothers started with a bicycle shop.
Yes.
And
I've read that quote.
yeah, and that one caught me. So I think it's important what you'd mentioned about 2 to the 53 bytes. And again, I'm jumping around on my questions, but this goes to this idea of quantum supremacy. So, a few years back, it takes a long time to set up these calculations. You have to do all of this stuff from scratch, right? A few years back, there would be absolutely no reason to try and do this with a quantum computer when you could use a regular machine. But as you've mentioned, you start to get to these higher qubit values, and you can outperform theoretically what any conventional computer could ever do, right?
Could ever do. Like, so just I know we're skipping around a little bit, but the claim of quantum supremacy by Google, for example, which is somewhat controversial, but I won't go into that. But in any case, it solved a problem which they claimed would take the world's, they solved a problem called a Gaussian boson sampling problem in 200 seconds, which would take the world's most powerful supercomputer 10,000 years to solve the same problem. Now, like, IBM came back and made like a counterclaim, said, no, it's not really 10,000 years. It's like way, way less than that. Anyway, but the fact remains that, and I don't know where that argument is between them right now, but the fact remains that there is just tremendous potential here. One issue which we can get into is just the issue of like the problems that quantum computers have right now and how researchers are attempting to overcome these problems, because there are like it's a lot more delicate of a situation than a classical computer, but we can maybe get to that later.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on is because you're working on the applied side of this, right? And again, with Quantum News, you cover this as well. So you're in this every day. When I got into it, when I started reading about this, one of the interest areas for me was this idea of early on, they'd said, are quantum computers proof of the many worlds hypothesis, because each of these qubits does one calculation. They said, well, how is it possible that it's getting the right answer unless maybe it's doing one calculation across an infinite number of universes? So
I love that one.
Yeah.
I read that and I thought that's really cool, but I think that is a really deep physics problem, because it goes to like the fundamental nature of quantum mechanics. Like whatever is going on in the background there is something that is still being, I don't know, studied and researched by the smartest people that humanity has ever produced.
That for me, that's the really exciting part is it starts out with these big theoretical, hypothetical case scenarios. And then you see this transition. And again, your company Abaqus is working towards this, where it's where the rubber meets the road. It's like we have these big dreams on the one hand, and you're taking that and saying, okay, let's put this thing to work. What can we actually do with this?
Yeah.
And that's the exciting part, because it's like looking at the dawn of computing back in the 1980s all over again, right? When personal
Yeah.
computers really just took over the world.
Right. Like one thing that really got me into this, and which I'm so interested in, is just the way that just normal, like classical computers have progressed since just sort of an idea. Like you have Babbage back in whenever the 18s or 1700s, I don't remember the year, and just of a like a calculating machine. And then you have Turing, and then you have the discovery of the transistor, or how you can use transistors um, to make processors. And like I can't think of a thing that's had more effect on our lives as a civilization as computers. I mean, like there are other candidates, I guess, like agriculture and whatever, vaccines, but like it's just every part of our life is now is a matter of computation to some degree. So like if we do end up running up against like a limit, say we have Moore's law, which everyone I'm sure is familiar with, basically is saying that computing power will double every 18 months. And it's been doing this since I think the 70s. It's just they're figuring out how to make smaller and smaller chips and get more and more transistors on there to make computers more powerful. And this enables, better software and just an overall increase in useful things that we can do. So if you think about how unadvanced and basic computers were in like the 40s, with vacuum tubes, that's kind of where we are right now with quantum computing. Like it's very early stage. There's back then in the 40s and 50s, there were people saying like, there's an argument, well, how are you going to get enough vacuum tubes into a computer to make it useful for any actual purpose that we would ever want it for? But then someone found another way around it. So that's probably where we are right now. The only thing that may be more helpful nowadays, which I find really interesting, is that how a classical computer and a quantum computer can start to work together so that we can like solve problems. They can augment each other essentially. And say machine learning or something can help with maybe error correction or something on the quantum computer.
Well, and I want to come back to that later, and I also have a lot of financially focused questions for anyone who's wondering, when I'm going to get to that as well. But I wanted to cover some of the basics, because for me, this is so exciting to see this evolve. For instance, when I started reading about this, they were literally setting up a calculation, which meant I believe some kind of a chemist or a physicist in a lab was actually setting up molecules, and they could measure them that way, So now today, we actually have quantum computer programming languages, like Python is being used for it, as well as Qiskit, Ocean, Q#, and the Cirq languages. So I'm wondering, could you tell me a little bit about what you might know about these languages? Because that's for me, these are all news. I didn't realize that you could actually program that in that way.
Yeah, so these are like languages that are being developed by different companies. So for example, Qiskit is IBM, Cirq is Google. There's an Amazon one which we use. It's called Bracket. And essentially it's just what they're attempting to do is create like a high level of abstraction so that programmers will start to learn how to program quantum computers. So it's usually looks a lot like Python, and that's just to make it appealing to people, I think. So more people start using it in developing applications and trying research projects and whatever they're interested in. And I would just say to your viewers, like anybody can go to IBM and sign up to get access to a quantum computer or a simulator, which kind of at 5 qubits is kind of the same thing. or probably even better if you're using the simulator. But at a deeper level, there's a lot of work to be done. Um, quantum software involves sort of different processes than at like
Yeah.
the very basic level than classical computers. So like you need to make measurements and you need to tune the quantum computer so that it's ready to go and then can perform calculations. But so I don't have a favorite language, but I would just say Qiskit seems to be the most popular one. That's anecdotally, and then there's other languages that you didn't mention. There's quite a few other ones too. It's like every company has its own sort of approach.
Now, so that's the software side. On the hardware side, is there any standardization that's emerging yet, or is this still stuff that's really just being kind of hacked together in a lab?
It's mostly, I wouldn't put it that harshly, but it is being hacked together mostly in a lab. Like from a hardware point of view, there's fundamentally like very different approaches to creating qubits. Like there are superconducting qubits, and then there's like very different things like ion traps, which is a big American company called IonQ is working on that. There's photonics, which uses photons to to as qubits essentially. There's Microsoft is working on a really interesting one called topological qubits, which you guys can look up if you're interested, which I find quite promising and fascinating. But yeah, there's no real standardization because nobody knows what's going to get us there. It might be something like a qubit can be anything. It can be well, not anything, but it doesn't. It's just like a logical qubit is can be multiple different things as long as it exhibits quantum properties.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would differentiate it from a transistor, right? A transistor, you may have different chemistries involved, but we know what a transistor looks like and how it functions. What you're saying is with the qubit, it's more about the quantum properties that it has, but you might be able to find those in different
Yeah.
configurations, so to speak.
Right. Like you have, say, logical qubit. And when I talk about it, I mean logical qubits because the engineering part of it is far more. It's it would take a lot of time to go into it. But my co-founder is actually more of a quantum engineer, and he's working on that sort of stuff right now. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
but
let me jump into the finance part then, if it's okay, because you've covered a lot of financial applications of quantum computing through your quantum news startup, and then your other startup, Abacus, right, is actually working to create financial industry solutions using quantum
Mhm.
computers. So I'm wondering, could you tell me a little bit about Abacus as a company? What stage is your company currently in? And what drew you to the financial aspect of problem solving with quantum computers?
Yeah, so we are early stage. We are in Vancouver, Canada, and we have our main advisor is a hedge fund in London. And they're very like quantitatively focused. So they're like there's quants and different types of traders. I've learned a lot about trading and investing lately. But so anyway, there are multiple applications in finance that people are looking into, including Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and like pretty much every large, well-known bank. Some of them involve things like portfolio optimization. So like picking a basket of securities and then finding the optimal based on like historical prices, finding the optimal mix. It's sort of anything that's computationally expensive is something that is going to be of interest to these funds and banks because some of them are it's too expensive to not when I say expensive I mean in computing power and in dollars too but
Yeah.
so that will be interesting to them. The thing we're working on specifically, we just decided to tackle a big problem that would have a big like potential impact and payoff for clients, and that's derivative pricing. So the
Okay.
derivatives market is, we looked into it. It just keeps going deeper and deeper, but it's like trillions and trillions of dollars. And it's even maybe quadrillions, depending on how you count it. And just the value of these things is like, just like, it's not even astronomical. It's beyond astronomical. And so we feel that a small advantage in like a 10 trillion or $100 trillion market, like if you can improve 1% or whatever, it represents a lot of money. So we're using it to basically, you can achieve a quantum advantage theoretically in something called Monte Carlo simulations. And Monte Carlo
Okay.
simulations are, they're not just used in finance, they're used in like nuclear physics and medicine, and they're all over. I think it was invented by John von Neumann in like the 40s. And so we're investigating uses for running Monte Carlo simulations to price derivatives. That's what our main focus is right now. Because the reason that we're kind of interested in that is finance has some advantages in terms of use cases. It's not like, I wouldn't say it's the most important use case. That would be like medicine or something, but it has a lot of data and a growing amount of data that's being required to make intelligent decisions. And because of that, it's just overwhelming for a classical computer right now.
Yeah.
So it's just a good use case to test it out on. Also, they have money and they're interested in trying to eke out even a small advantage. So
Yeah.
um, it just was like the obvious one. I'm really, really interested in machine learning and like quantum applications in quantum computing for machine learning, which could be another really interesting area that we have been looking into a bit. But
And those kind of dovetail together. Actually, I was going to come back to that in a moment. But so now you guys are working with derivatives pricing. I wanted to ask about just like just me, I guess. What about playing the stock market, Forex, or cryptocurrency trading? You could see me blushing as I ask that, but and the reason I ask is that's when you talk about quantum computing and finance, that's what's going to jump into most people's minds is like, I want to hit the stock market, So,
yeah. So that's not at the moment, we're not working on like prediction, but that is definitely an area of great interest. Um, like think of, if you want to understand it, think of what machine learning can do right now in terms of like making, say, you do regression analysis or something. Um, think about that, and then just you can, it's like hyping it up on steroids with quantum machine learning. Um, there's definitely, it's hard to recognize patterns because there's like, as a human can only recognize so many variables and make like predictions based on past patterns. And a classical algorithm can deal with a lot more data. One would assume that there would be a significant quantum advantage for that sort of prediction algorithm. And there has been demonstrated, at least theoretically demonstrated, quantum advantage for different types of machine learning algorithms. So I think it would be a really exciting area to look into for sure. But I've been seeing advertisements about like quantum machine learning for finance, and I think it's kind of scammy. I think it's really making a lot of claims that are just not accurate
well,
right now.
let me ask about that. Is there a gold rush happening in this area? Because I've been seeing a lot more about quantum computing online over the last couple of years. And the dot-com, that era was an example where it took a couple of years. The technology was there. You started to see some applications and use cases for it, right? Things got better over time. In the case of the internet, modems got faster and things along those lines. And then the investors got excited, and you had this massive gold rush. Are you starting to see the same thing in quantum computing, or is it not started to do a bubble yet?
There are different opinions about this. I my my opinion, which is all I can offer, is that there is a bubble here. I don't, and see, relatively recently, there's been several like SPACs, like which is kind of like an IPO, but
Hmm.
not quite an IPO. And there's companies, I think IonQ did one, Rigetti, and so they're trying to monetize like whatever IP they have, or however little they might have a little bit of revenue here and there. So when you look at those sorts of valuations, like getting a couple $1 billion valuation on a few $1 million of revenue and losses and net income losses and whatnot, like you think there is sort of um a bubble. And also the governments of the world are starting to pour money into this as well. Like the Biden administration is pumping way more money than's ever been put into quantum computing before. And also there's the issue of like geopolitical stuff, geopolitical rivalries. China is also apparently deeply researching quantum computing, and might even be ahead of the West. Nobody knows for sure. Europe, us here in Canada, there's starting to be more and more money being poured in by the government. So hopefully, like private investors will match government money and get the industry really going. But unfortunately, it does feel very hypey to me because this is still very experimental and very theoretical. I mean,
Yeah.
it is possible and it's amazing. And the advances made in the past just 2 years have been like just incredible. Like every obstacle is kind of they're figuring out a way to overcome it from an engineering point of view. But it's still not, just to be clear to your viewers, that there's nothing, no useful task that a quantum computer can do better than a classical computer. So
Well, not yet,
not
right?
yet,
But
not yet.
yeah, and that comes back to the whole idea of quantum supremacy. But one of the things that I'd wondered about was even if the hardware, or even when the hardware exceeds traditional computers, it seems like the computing model, that the problem-solving model itself is kind of an issue. And when you get into financial applications, right, like especially in the case of something like stocks or Forex or crypto or something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, you've got your main variables, and then you have thousands, maybe tens of thousands of contributing variables, and I'm sure with the derivatives pricing that you're looking at is probably very similar. There are so many pieces that go into that. It seems like the model itself is probably going to end up being more of a limitation than the hardware or the method for running it, right?
Yeah, I think so. Like I think it's going to take, it is taking a different from, this is why it's so interesting, right? And so exciting because everything you do is sort of, you're either one of the first to do it, or you're thinking about, if you think of a new thing, you might be the only person on earth that's thought of it. So it takes a new paradigm and new way of looking at programming even. I mean, even though we're trying to make it very accessible to programmers, but just normal classical programmers that don't know anything about quantum mechanics. But it's going to take different approaches. There's all sorts of new algorithms that are going to have to be figured out. There's not that many quantum algorithms right now. There's only very few. And so there might be a whole bunch more out there which can
Mm.
show us an advantage. So yeah, you're right. It's just like we will eventually have to really change our way of thinking about things. I think anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, David, on that note, let me thank you so much for your time today. I was going to close by asking if quantum computers would lead to a situation of haves and have-nots in financial trend prediction, but this situation already exists, as I understand things. Would it maybe be better to simply view this as kind of like an escalation in some kind of a war of the bits when it comes to finance and prediction?
I'm going to use that word a bit. Yeah, I think it is. I think it will lead to, like, when it comes to technology, there's always, in finance anyway, in all aspects, like there's always like an arms race. So that's what we're going to see here too, I think. Like some those companies that can't keep up, like, are going to find themselves at a huge disadvantage if this really takes off and gets going. And they know this right now. And there's a lot of companies that are sort of worried that they will not be able to compete. And so once somebody gets an advantage right away, they can just really press the advantage until everyone else, and then they're just so far ahead. You've seen this in the history of technological development. So yeah, I could definitely see this world developing just as it is developing now. It could get more pronounced and extreme.
Absolutely. So David, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.